Answers what she did have, however, was an overwhelming sense of loss. She had no job, no steady income, and a sick mother who depended on her. What was she going to do? Taking a deep breath, Maria shoved the card into her pocket, stood up and decided to face the day. She took a long warm shower, letting the water calm her nerves. After dressing in her usual simple jeans and a blouse, she tied her hair into a loose ponytail and grabbed her coat. Even though she had no reason to return to the diner, something inside her told her to go. Maybe she just wanted closure. Maybe she wanted to see if Carson regretted what he had done. Or maybe deep down she was hoping for some sort of miracle. As she stepped out of her small apartment, the cold morning air hit her, making her shiver. She pulled her coat tightly around her and started walking toward the diner. The streets were just beginning to wake up, filled with early commuters, and Shopone is preparing for another busy day. Life was moving on as if nothing had happened, but for Maria, everything had changed by the time she reached the diner. Her heart was pounding. She hesitated at the door, taking a deep breath before pushing it open. The familiar chime rang through the air the moment she stepped inside, her former boss. Mr. Carson turned to look at her. The disgust in his eyes was unmistakable. He scoffed, shaking his head. "What are you doing here?" Maria swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. Just before she could even finish her sentence, she noticed something that made her stomach drop. He had already replaced her. A new waitress wearing the same uniform she had once worn was serving coffee to a table of customers. She looked nervous, probably just as desperate for the job as Maria had been. Something about seeing it, the finality of it, stung more than she had expected. Carson smirked, took no time at all to find someone better. Maria clenched her fists at her sides, willing herself to stay composed. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. She turned on her heels, ready to leave, when suddenly the bell above the door chimed. A wave of silence swept through the diner. The energy in the room shifted instantly. The usual chatter died down, and every head turned toward the entrance. And then he stepped in, the same elderly man from the night before, but this time he was completely transformed. Gone were the casual clothes, and instead he wore an impeccably tailored suit. Sharp and commanding, his posture was straight, his expression unreadable, and on either side of him stood two towering bodyguards, their presence enough to make the entire diner tense up. His aura had changed entirely. Maria's breath caught in her throat. Carson, who had been so smug just seconds ago, suddenly looked confused. He frowned, trying to mask his nervousness. The man didn't waste a second. He stepped further into the diner, his polished shoes echoing again against the floor. His presence was overwhelming, suffocating even without looking at anyone else. He spoke in a voice that was calm, yet powerful. Manager. Now a shiver ran down Maria's spine. The diner remained frozen. No one dared to speak. Carson hesitated for a moment before forcing a tight smile and stepping forward. CEO of the largest restaurant chain in this city. A collective gasp rippled through the diner. Maria felt the air leave her lungs. Carson, on the other hand, went completely pale. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his hands now visibly shaking. Silence, absolute silence. Customers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Employees froze in place, unable to believe what they were hearing. William Harrington, the William Harrington. The name wasn't just familiar, it was legendary in the restaurant industry. He didn't just own a few restaurants, he owned hundreds, a vast empire of high-end establishments and Michelin-starred locations. His reputation was unmatched, and he was standing right there. Carson looked like he was about to pass out. He licked his dry lips desperately, trying to salvage the situation. Sir, I... I had no idea." William raised a single hand. The gesture alone shut Carson up instantly. No excuses. His voice was ice cold. "You humiliated me in front of your entire staff and customers. Worse, you fired one of the most hard-working employees I've ever met for simply defending basic human decency." Maria's heart pounded violently in her chest. She could barely process what was happening. Was this real? Carson's forehead, bead with sweat. He was doomed, and he knew it. Then came the final blow. William gave a slow nod. "You're fired, effective immediately." A stunned silence. Carson staggered back, his eyes wide with horror. He looked around the room as if searching for someone to help him, but no one moved. One of William's bodyguards stepped forward and handed Carson an envelope. "Pack your things and leave," the words sealed his fate. Carson stared blankly at the envelope. His hands trembled as he took it, his entire world collapsing before his eyes, his ego, his power, his authority all gone. Maria watched in disbelief as Carson slumped his shoulders in defeat, then turned and walked toward the back. Humiliated, the once mighty manager was now nothing. And then William turned to Maria. His face softened, and for the first time he smiled. "Maria," he said warmly, "how would you like to be the new manager?" She nearly collapsed. Her vision blurred with tears as she choked on her words. My William nodded. "You have integrity, you have heart, and that's what I need." In a leader, tears spilled down her cheeks. This wasn't just a promotion. This was a second chance at life. She nodded furiously. "Yes, yes, I would love to." A small chuckle left. William lips good. And just like that, Maria's fate changed forever. Maria could hardly believe what was happening. Just yesterday, she had lost everything, her job, her stability, and almost her hope. Now, in a matter of minutes, the very man she had defended was standing before her, changing her life in ways she never imagined. She wiped her tear-streaked face, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. The weight of yesterday's despair lifted, replaced by something unfamiliar but comforting: hope. William Harrington, the CEO of the largest restaurant chain in the city, smiled warmly at her. He wasn't just a powerful businessman. There was something deeply kind in his eyes. The way he looked at her wasn't just with respect, but with admiration. The diner was still frozen in shock. Customers whispered among themselves. The employees who had once worked alongside Maria now looked at her with awe, their expressions mixed with disbelief and excitement. William gestured toward one of the empty booths. "Come sit with me," he said in a gentle but voice. Maria hesitated for a moment. She was used to serving customers, not sitting with them, especially not someone as important as him, but she nodded quickly, wiping her hands on her jeans before sliding into the booth. William took the seat across from her. His bodyguard stood a few steps away, watching over him like silent sentinels. The entire diner was still watching, but at this moment Maria didn't care. This moment was hers. She swallowed hard, still trying to wrap her mind around what was happening. I don't know what to say," she admitted, her voice slightly shaky. William chuckled, taking a sip of the water one of his guards had placed in front of him. "You don't have to say anything, Maria. I should be the one thanking you." Maria's brows furrowed. "Thanking me?" He nodded, his sharp eyes softening. "You stood up for me when you didn't even know who I was. You spoke out against disrespect, even when it cost you everything. That kind of courage is rare." Maria bit her lip. She hadn't done it for recognition or reward. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. She lowered her gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. I just believe people deserve respect, especially the elderly. My mother always taught me that." At the mention of her mother, William's expression changed slightly, as if he had been waiting for her to bring it up. He reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, fat envelope. Maria's breath hitched when he placed it on the table in front of her. Her hand trembled as she looked at it. She didn't need to open it to know what was inside. Money, a lot of it. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Take it," William said softly, pushing the envelope toward her. Maria's eyes widened. "What? No, I can't." He held up a hand, cutting off her protest before she could even finish. "Yes, you can, and you will." She stared at him, unable to form words. He leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. "I learned that your mother is sick." Maria's throat tightened. "How did he know I made a few calls this morning?" He explained. "It wasn't hard to find out that you've been struggling. You've been working extra shifts, skipping meals just to send money home. You didn't just need this job, you were holding everything together with it." Tears welled up in Maria's eyes. Everything she had fought to keep hidden was now laid bare before him. William gestured toward the envelope. "This should cover her medical expenses. Everything she needs. Hospital bills, treatment, medication, it's all taken care of." That was it. The dam broke. Maria let out a small, shaky SOB as she covered her mouth with her hands. Tears poured down her cheeks, and no matter how much she tried, she couldn't stop them. She didn't care that the entire diner was watching. She didn't care that she was crying in front of one of the most powerful men in the city. All she cared about was the fact that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. William watched her with a patient smile, waiting for her to compose herself. Maria wiped her tears with the back of her hand, sniffling as she looked at the envelope. She couldn't believe it, why she whispered, her voice trembling. William leaned back against the booth, studying her. "Because you